Hello and welcome to Talking Live. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig right here in Star Shop Studio. And I am so excited because I found the best website for all of you, and I'm going to share it with you. It's called Flower Power with Jill, and we have the founder here with us, Jill Brooke. She's done everything. She's a playwright. She was on CNN as an entertainment reporter. She's a best-selling author, and now she has created this amazing site for the latest news on flowers. Jill, so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here.
I have to say, when we first discussed this, we were at Michael's for
It's always so much fun
lunch.
there.
It's always about Michael's. And you were telling me a little bit about the project you were working on, and it was hard for me to conceptualize it. I had kind of images of hippie flowers. I didn't know what to expect.
And you want to know why? Most people felt that too, because
Really?
I think that any entrepreneur knows that you have to just follow your instincts.
Yeah.
It's like information from an unknown source that you should trust.
Yes.
And I was thinking about just how people really need happy news.
True.
And they also want news that's informative, that helps them grow as a person. And flowers seem to have been that one thing that makes everybody happy, whether it's millennials, it's baby boomers, it's all across the country, it's all across the world. Consistently, flowers make people happy.
Yeah.
And they also have really ancient histories, and people just thought, is this going to be a gardening show? There are plenty of those. And I went, because you're thinking narrowly that it's just flowers in the garden.
Yeah.
But flower motifs populate jewelry like this. They populate decor.
Yeah.
Every major painter, like Van Gogh, for instance, said, I started painting flowers. Why do you think?
Because it made him happy? It calmed him down.
Well, that's so true, because as a therapist, of course, she's a great therapist, she knows that flowers actually have a secret sauce of calming people, which we can talk about later. But in Van Gogh's case, what it was, he said, I started painting flowers because I couldn't afford models.
Oh my goodness.
And so flowers were free, and especially where he was in that beautiful place in Provence. And that started, his joy and love of flowers. And then obviously other artists did it for, similar reasons, because it made them happy. Or in Renoir's case, which most people don't know, what happened is that he actually wanted to be a singer. And this is why we should always talk about reinvention, because certainly Flower Power with Jill is my reinvention.
Yeah.
And what happened was he wanted to be a singer, and his father couldn't afford the apprenticeship and the lessons. So he had to work in a porcelain company. And guess what? He started painting
Flowers.
Bingo!
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he realized he had a talent for it and a love of it. And that's why you'll see in all his paintings, flowers will always populate the decor, or will be on a table or someplace, because he always loved flowers, and that launched that part of his career and life.
I have to say, again, I did not know really what to expect when I was looking through your site. And there's so much rich information that I would never think about being in this one place about one topic, flowers, and there's just information about psychology, just different floral shows that are around, history, mythology, and it got me to look around the world differently. I mean, I started noticing flowers that were around me that I don't think I would have noticed in quite the same way. Floral motifs in jewelry, in art, but just even nature. And so that's what your site did for me. Was that your intention?
It really was, because I have always loved flowers, and because I'm a history buff and I have a degree in art history, I've always really looked into flowers and their histories, and also why certain cultures used flowers. Like, for instance, we were chatting about this earlier about Josephine and how she loved flowers, and she really was one of the queens of flowers, along with, of course, Queen Victoria. And we can say even in this country, Lady Bird Johnson, because how did she beautify America? Without being political, she said, let's beautify it with flowers, and let's take the highways and just drape them with beautiful flowers and plant them. And if you think even some of the garden clubs in America, I mean, what they did, and, they actually, fought for state flowers so that we recognize how important state flowers are, and what they represent to the local communities. Because guess what? In America, we share all the same roots. And you would think that, for instance, what's the state flower of New York?
Oh God, I have no idea. Is it every state has a flower though?
Yes, they do.
Okay, I have no idea.
Well, think of Texas, right? It's a red state. Well, it has the blue bonnet.
All right.
And then New York, it's the red rose.
It's the red rose, which is one of the most powerful flowers historically.
Historically, it is the first of all, it is the one flower of our nation and actually of the world. And the story is Aphrodite. Aphrodite, it depends how you pronounce it. Anyway, she was the goddess of love and beauty, and she wanted to have a great flower for her son, who was called Eros, E-R-O-S. So you take the E from Eros, and then it becomes rose. So what will be the most beautiful flower? And the thing I love about roses, which you can plant and, of course, are not only fragrant but durable, is everybody talks, it's the one flower that you have to get to the thorns in order to get to the rose, which is really such a metaphor of life. Because,
and relationships.
And everything about it, because, sometimes you have to struggle a little to get to the beauty. Yeah. And these are the stories.
Sometimes? How about all the time?
All the time. That's very true.
So the rose was used, so you mentioned Cleopatra and Napoleon, and I have to say, I mean, I've certainly heard stories about Cleopatra, but you share stories on your site that I had never heard about.
Yeah.
One story was how she filled her pillow with rose petals.
With rose petals, yes, for Mark Antony. And don't forget, this was a woman who was able to seduce Caesar. And that's a piece on how flowers have been used for seduction throughout history. But the only thing about Cleopatra, as you will discover, is that while she was incredibly seductive and wily, she could be a little vindictive because...
And also slightly murderous, which I thought was interesting, based on my first book, Marital Homicide. She did a little test, right? Where she poisoned petals.
Right, and she put it in a drink. And she had Mark Antony come over, and he was about to drink it. And she went, "No, stop." And he went, "Why?" He goes, "I'm testing you." And basically, she had her servant then drink it so that he would discover that she could so easily poison him that better not mess with her.
I kind of like that a little bit.
I know. Well, except for that poor servant who then died a terrible death.
She didn't get in trouble for that.
Well, I think that in that period, there wasn't checks and balances.
Right.
And when you're the emperor,
Jill? The good old days.
Well, I wouldn't call it the good old days. I would call it the old days. Yeah.
Right. And I did not know that Napoleon was such a romantic.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, who knew?
Well, we had an idea that Josephine...
Maybe people who studied history in the right way knew. But this is what you will find on the site. And they're quick anecdotal stories that are very powerful.
But it shows you how much he loved her, that literally as he was conquering all of Europe, she was incredibly avarice. She just wanted as many rose bushes as possible. And don't forget, when, I'm not calling them looting the ports that they conquered, but they would fill their ships, obviously, with gold and food and all different types of things. But literally, he instructed the Navy to make sure that if they ever were any rose plants or exotic flowers, to make sure that that had priority so he could gift it to Josephine. And I also...
And she seduced with flowers, right? Didn't she change her floral arrangements to add to her sexual allure?
Yeah, because, as you know, and I know that you've written often in your books, you can't be ho-hum all the time and take anything for granted. Right. So occasionally you have to sprinkle things with a little surprise. Mm-hmm. So he would come back after a long voyage, and the boudoir could be decorated with different decor, and which I think is a really nice thing, or different flower arrangements. And also, it's about storytelling. Anybody here, obviously, we're talking about these great historical characters, but it's all about opening up your eyes and your heart and your mind to realize the power of flowers and what they bring to everyone. And it's storytelling. Like, for instance, I had a friend who won a great tennis tournament, right? So, you know, put a hyacinth, or you put different in a vase along with something else, and you just say, well, this represents being sporty. So this is going to be part of my table decor when I have a vase of flowers, you know, for dinner. Or, you know, for instance, gratitude or is a hydrangea, or you can also have an orange rose, for instance, which also means, you know, gratitude and being thankful and friendship. And yellow daffodils are all about new beginnings and resilience. And if you think about it in the Boston Marathon right now, how do you turn a situation where you felt powerless to feeling a little bit more powerful? Well, what the Boston Marathon organizers, you know, did with association with others is it's called Boston Be Strong, and there were pots of daffodils. So when the runners who come on in the back of their head, they're thinking, I hope I don't get bombed. But they don't think about that because they were seeing literally lines and lines of daffodils to remind them of resilience and, you know, possibility.
I love that. We actually had on a lifestyle expert last week who talked about decorating with carnations. That it's not expensive and you can get a lot of them and they just look so beautiful, and it's not about the expense really. It's about the look and how it makes people feel.
And the storytelling.
And the storytelling, true.
And the carnations, if you just look up for the floral meanings, and it's not only the floral meanings, it's the colors, and realize that you can match it and look around you and you realize that, like, as I'm dressed in a floral dress, which I, because it makes people happy.
Yeah.
Floral motifs have pollinated and populated fashion for centuries and centuries.
And they're so in right now. Everything is about the floral design. I think we see it a lot in England as well. Do you know why it would be more popular there versus here?
Well, they're the master gardeners of the world, and also their climate over centuries have really allowed, because it's cool and wet, but not too wet. And so some of the best breeds of flowers have been able to absolutely flourish there. And you see even right now this week with Queen Elizabeth, and she always is in the floral hat, and today she was wearing yet another floral dress, because psychologically, especially in a gray climate, when as you know, that there was this really interesting study that said that when it's gloomy and dark and rainy outside, our tendency is to go for gray or black.
Yes.
But we have to fight that impulse and try to put on something colorful, try to put on something with a flower, and you will see your mood lift. So I think that the British, first of all, are the master gardeners. They care deeply about it in their culture. And that is something that they export in the same way that we export great storytelling through movies. They do wonderful things through flowers. And on my site now, I was just at the Chelsea flower show.
We saw pictures. I don't know if we were able to get pictures on our site, but it's definitely on Talking Live. We have pictures of you at the flower show, and we have some of the flowers that you have on your site because they were just so beautiful.
And they're masters, and one of the things that we're really trying to do is for florists to finally get the credit that they should. Florists deserve credit. And like, for instance, the museum in North Carolina had asked a group of florists to look at these paintings and then find a way to construct floral examples that just illustrate those paintings. And these floral displays are masterpieces. So, I had Jenny Tobin on, who did The Favorite and has done almost every Oscar show. And I said, oh my gosh, you had 5 Oscar-nominated films that you worked on. I mean, is there anything else you would like in your life? And she went, yes, I'd like to get a film credit once.
Oh, wow.
Because, the somebody who mans the bathrooms, the sister of a producer, they'll all get credit. But florists normally don't. It's a set designer. And for the favorite, which won an Oscar for certainly Best Actress, she was on that, and they finally gave it to her. But you also realize that unlike a painter, and all the magazines and newspapers and TV shows talk about new emerging artists, well, I want to be the place that talks about florists as artists, because it's so hard to take something that's so perishable. Because no matter what, outside of an orchid and a carnation, and I think that's great that your previous guest mentioned carnation.
She did.
Because they're long-lasting.
Yeah.
And the Astromedia is also long-lasting. But most really only last 4 or 5 days, but the secret, of course, is changing water all the time. But as a result, these masterful florists take something that's so perishable and create these incredible designs. And I just think that they should get credit as real artists.
I agree, and I'm surprised that they haven't. Do you have a theory as to why they haven't to date?
Well, I don't think that they've had an advocate like Flower Power with Jill.
That's right.
And, I think that we've shown as a website just what is happening around the country. But I think in New York we have Lewis Miller, and he did that Flash Flower campaign, and, where all of a sudden changed people's days, and literally, you'd be walking down the subway, would all of a sudden have these big trash cans full of flowers, and now that's been copied across the country. And I think that, once we get more famous floral designers, when they get credit, they're really great about sharing and, raising awareness of what their art is. Yeah. But I also think you hit something, as a psychologist, psychiatrist as well in your, world, is that so much of the news, in order to get ratings, is all negativity and fear-based. And you understand it because we're pros, but it's not good for the psyche of our country, right?
It's really depressing, and you and I talked about our mutual goal in terms of, here I want the topics to help people learn about people who are sharing their passion in a positive way, their talents and skills. It's a happy place. And you do the same with your site. I just want to mention something else about your site, because I want people to know that there are different categories. So there's a category where you have health and interesting studies of flowers and how it interfaces with the psyche. And a couple of studies that you mentioned, and I'll also mention here, men become more communicative when given flowers?
Yes, it's a myth that, it's 2019, everyone, and what happens is that Haviland Jones and Haley did this really wonderful study which showed that when men actually receive flowers, because it's the whole incredible experience. It's David Joyce, who's the Oxford physicist, says that flowers actually represent perfect beauty. So everybody, all genders respond to it. And it's just not been our habit to give it to men. But when they do get it, what happens is not only surprise, and then all of a sudden eye contact is different, voice, changes, communication skills change. And I think that, and also it's a thoughtful gesture. It's that I think that men in general are so used to everybody requiring of them that when somebody just sends them flowers, for whatever, thank you for a thoughtful gesture, or congratulations on this, that they really like it. And
I have a picture of Marvin and me, because Marvin also is with the show, and we went out this past weekend with our spouses, and there was, flowers in the background, and we took a picture in honor of you, because we wanted to recognize the show. A couple of other studies that you show on the site and talk about is science says flowers have the same healing effect as valium.
Without the side effects, which is also really pretty terrific.
Right, and that smelling lavender flows through our system and helps us to feel calm.
Yes, well, there's certain flowers that actually trigger, our neurons in a really positive way.
And they can trigger memories as well. Like whenever I smell lilacs, it brings me back to my childhood, because we had a lilac bush that was so beautiful. And also gardens can cure the nursing shortage. You want to tell us briefly about that?
This was a story that Linda Lee, who I work with, who used to be the editor of the gardening and home section of the New York Times, and she found this story in England, and it was sort of a test case, because if you think about it, nurses feel bullied often because they have to deal with doctors who are under incredible stress, not only from their skill, but the way that managed care is right now, that they have to get through so many patients, and then the patients themselves. So there's a lot of burnout with nurses. Is. And so what this hospital did is that they've created this special garden of flowers. And it doesn't have to be a large space, it's a little space, but it's also the power of flowers. And literally having that and seeing it, reduced
nature.
it, and just
Getting
nature.
A little bit of a break.
But no, it's flowers. It's really the flowers, because the whole idea is what flowers emit. And it is that secret sauce. And, if you think about it, like when you're in a car and you're wondering, oh my gosh, I'm hearing beep, beep, beep. How did they know that from the electromagnetic wavelengths that you're getting, that they're picking up on? Flowers emit something incredibly special and healing. We're doing a story right now with Dr. Andrew Weil, who talked about the healing powers. And not only that, I think it's important to note that even at hospitals now, they have noted that those who looked at flowers and had a floral garden nearby out their window versus those who didn't, had healed at a 30% higher rate. So, flowers have power, and that's what we're the first place that's saying, no, it is arranging because we want you to use flowers, but you can use flowers, have been used for throughout history, for food, for all your medicines. I mean, think about it. 70% of all our foods are also have flowers in them.
So it is good to know that on the site that you could get daily news and studies. And before we get to the quick five, I want to mention the jewelry. And we have Red Carpet Rocks, which is a jewelry company that actually rents jewelry. And they have a lot of flower and floral motifs, which are really beautiful. But in your site, you talk about flowers and how they're used in jewelry and how there are different
that's a really good company.
Pieces that are popular during different moments in time, or different, like during the Victorian era, there were certain flowers that were being
the Victorian
used.
Was orange blossom, and Queen Victoria wore orange blossom, and that was the first. She also introduced the white wedding dress. But as a result of her love of orange blossoms, Prince Albert would always buy, jewelry that were made of orange blossoms, and those were, part of things that actually recently sold. And Sotheby's right now actually has, along with Carol Woolton's book, Sparkling Brilliance, which is brilliant, talks about the history of each season and how certain people love certain jewelry. Like, for instance, you were talking about Napoleon, and how people would put pansies or violets, in lockets. And, like Edelweiss, you always hear Edelweiss, Well, that's, in Germanic culture, what happened with that, that's really hard to find. That's in the mountains. So if a suitor was able to brave the mountains and then get that Edelweiss, then he was he would win. He'd score big.
He was a good guy.
Right.
Let me get to the quick five
so
we can hear and help the audience know a little bit more about you. What would you rate a 10 out of 10?
Chelsea Flower Show and my son and husband.
Oh, I love that. Right answer. What are you absolutely determined to do?
Make people happy and spread the joy and let them know that you can script your life so you can be happy.
And really, your site does that. It
it's
really does.
Trying
it made me happy. What fad or trend do you hope comes back?
Kindness. Good manners.
That would be nice.
Crass versus class.
Especially in the city. It'd be a nice...
Class versus crass, rather. It's like we've shifted. But, as I always tell my son, that manners only help you, they never hurt you.
That's absolutely true. What are some small things that make your day better?
A flower, good cup of coffee, and a kiss.
Yeah. What are you most looking forward to in the next 10 years?
That I poured the values into my son to be a really good citizen, that my husband and I continue to have good health as well as my loved ones, and that people realize that we have more in common than apart, and that we, as I say in our State Flower Project, that we're all share the same roots, and not to be so fear-based and be more love-based, because there's power in that.
Yes, I totally agree, and I think your site absolutely does that. I want everybody to head over to Talking Live. We'll have a link to Jill's site so you can click around. It's free. You can enjoy it. There's great information on there. It's powerflowerwithjill.com. We'll have a link.
Wait, it's Flower Power with Jill.
Jill with Jill. What did I say? With Jill.
Power Flower. It sounds great.
Flower Power. I just totally reversed
well,
that.
Think of how many guests this woman has.
You know what? That's what happened. I spoke to you and I realized the powers and flowers, and I just inverted it. But we're going to have it correct on the site so that you can click and enjoy. And I also want to let everybody know that there is going to be a link to the site, because Red Carpet Rocks is having their mobile pop-up store next Wednesday. So you'll be able to check that out and look at floral jewelry, which people can rent and enjoy. Thank you so much for joining us, Jill. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure.
You'll have to come back and just keep us updated on all the great things going on with you and your site. And we will see you next week on Talking Live. Thanks again.